So this is the level design breakdown for my final project piece. This is my portfolio 3 of my final body of reserved work. So I'm just going to be discussing the elements of level design that went into my approach to designing this level, and some of the features of it that I feel like are worth mentioning. So right from the bat, your game starts within this darkened tunnel. Just for playtesting, we added a little point light over there just to kind of make it obvious where to go in case players didn't figure out how to target their flashlight. Right from the bat, they've got destructible props and interactable objects right in front of them. Most players kind of want to try their weapon out when they spawn in, so they've got some objects in front of them they can blast away at, get introduced to the destructive mechanic, get introduced to how props can be influenced by their weapon. And as they proceed through here, they'll step over a trigger volume, triggering some mission context, and it will then activate this door. And if you've seen it for the playthrough, the entrance to this door lines up nicely with their final objective in the distance, framed by the sun, or kind of giving a halo effect, kind of drawing the eye to where their final objective is. If they look carefully, they can actually see the exit of the level over there in the distance. But right at the forefront, they have their two mechanized infantry. These would be the NPCs that they control to help them through the game. They've got a little area here just to kind of get used to moving them around if they want to. Similar kind of explore, but it's fairly evident where they need to go. The whole level is designed in a kind of bay formation, so it's kind of fairly linear in the direction you move, and considering the player can already see their final objective in the distance, it's fairly intuitive the direction they need to go. This first loading bay area is going to be their introduction to how combat works within the game. It's there to primarily introduce them to how they can to how the enemy AI will behave around them, and how and the best strategies to deal with them. So once they step through the trigger volume, the game intensity will rise as enemies are spawned. This trigger volume will be spawning enemies around back here, so by the time they come around, the player has usually, for places most players usually around about here in a sort of kill box, and they have either two options. They can the idea is it's encouraged to either have them push out of line of sight and break contact, and at which point they'll step into this trigger and they'll be attacked by another wave of enemies, increasing the intensity. And this will put them in a bit of a tricky situation here, but there's a lot of cover for them to use, introduce them to how the enemy is going to be trying to get line of sight and the importance of shutting down enemy aggression and taking initiative. On the flip side, they've got high ground here that they can contest with. I found some players, it's kind of important to encourage them to, some players were naturally trying to take high ground and get aggressive with their robots in this, and especially considering the close range nature of the shotgun. This little elevator platform was to encourage that. Also plenty of destructible items for them to kind of blow away chunks and cover so that NPCs can shoot through, or use their NPCs suppressing enemies to kind of blow holes in a cover for them to exploit with their own shotgun. Either way, this is a good position to hold. Enemies kind of struggle to push into them. They're fairly easy to just pin down with just the 2 mechs, because the worst situation to be is to have enemies on all sides, and that's what this area is meant to teach you, is that you really don't want to get surrounded. You can't get overwhelmed. You need to kind of pick a location and execute on it, and just commit to that and attempt to wipe out the enemies in that area. Moving through, there's another trigger here. Players will then fight their way up this kind of outside lobby area before entering the warehouse further in. This is just kind of to get them kind of chasing in any enemies that are left alive. Will naturally run into the building seeking cover, and the player will then hunt them down, triggering the ambush section, which spawns more enemies, turns this light off, and then the player will have to use their flashlight. When the player toggles a flashlight, it actually toggles flashlights on the mechs as well. They've got quite large floodlights, and this area is kind of a demonstration of how just adding, working around light can allow the mechs to create entirely new gameplay mechanics that would, how it builds upon the existing mechanic of moving the mechs around. Now you've got this added complication of light, and how you can, and how that affects your situational awareness. Now you can use the mechs to modify your own situational awareness by shining lights on certain areas, keeping line of sight on certain spots. The enemies do have weapon reports, so you can see their muzzle flashes to get a good idea of where they are. And if that proves too challenging, the player can get pushed back out onto this balcony, which is a little bit easier to hold, but it's kind of a flip coin. There's not much cover out here. so the player kind of ends up hunkered down between their mechs trying to defend it. But this is kind of a just in case. But most of the combat usually is occurring in this sort of middle section as the player attempts to contest the high ground, or they can fully commit and try and take this upper sort of control balcony overlooking the entire area, which is definitely a good location to have for the enemies spawn with priority up here. So it's difficult to contest unless the player comes in through this entrance. This is kind of encourage players to reward players for kind of attacking obstacles in different ways each time. Moving through, this section is kind of just to cover any bleed off from the previous fight if enemies pull back a little bit more. So if the player has been a little bit sloppy and enemies have survived, there's this kind of little lobby area to deal with any stragglers before moving on to the next section. Once the player steps over this trigger, they're going to need to push down this bridge. By the time they get to around that first set of cover, enemies will now be shooting at them either from this balcony here, or they'll have pushed up and started taking positions here and suppressing the player as they cross the bridge. This area, I wish I could have done more of it, but at the moment it's just kind of a way to tie the level up and to give the players a cool cinematic experience of pushing forwards into enemy fire and attempting to overwhelm the defenders here before triggering the door here and ending the level. So all these principles for the way I approach my level design was heavily inspired by games like Half-Life 2. Specifically, this whole light section was inspired by a level within episode 2, which was which has the player using their flashlight to direct Alex, the NPC companion who has a gun, to do the shooting for you. It's an interesting play on existing tools within the sandbox to create this entirely new and memorable encounter. And I was curious to see how I could include those kind of concepts within my own approach to level design. But as a intro level to this game, if this game was ever to go further, this level would function as a tutorial. The purpose of it is to walk the player through mechanics and introduce them to how to play the game, how the game's going to be reacting to them. Kind of teach them. First of all, teach them how to interact with enemies. Kind of give them an idea of what to expect, and also an excuse for me to muck around with new mechanics and kind of show what could be done with the concept in the future. All the while providing context for the ambience and the mission brief and enemy voice lines to kind of give an idea of the setting. There's some basic assets I've thrown in here just to kind of give an idea of the art style and what the level might look like if it was ever fully fleshed out. All the destructible objects, I've got an anchor field in the middle so you can blow away the edges. But that's just an overview of the level design. I'm now going to go into a little bit more detail about. Actually, no, I'll save that for them. It's still written in the journal, so I'll just leave this at that for the level design elements. I hope that was informative to whoever's listening to this.